white pumpkins, dyed planks, and a brand new structure for the Pale Garden. These are all improvements that we know Mojang are considering for the next update. This is something they have explicitly said in their Future of Minecraft update, but it's also something you can see in their actions over the past 3 updates, because in 2 of those updates they've added one of the top 5 most voted biomes and dimensions. Therefore, they clearly look at community suggestions and work out if they're any good, and so today I wanted to do precisely that too, and show you the weirdest thing a Minecraft developer has ever tweeted. By the way, hello, I'm AbbyXToyCat, and subscribe if you want to see more Minecraft update stuff like this. But let's start by talking about the most suggested feature in this update, because it is by far the white pumpkin. I am amazed by how many people have independently had this idea, but rather than just saying they should add a white pumpkin to the game, I think that only good ideas should come to Minecraft, and so here's one from Eternal, where they showed that a white pumpkin could be more than just a slightly dyed pumpkin, but instead you could have a Creaking inspired carving. I love the artist's vision for the equivalent of a jack-o'-lantern with this new block set. Look how incredible this looks, but also you can see they have this idea of white pumpkin stems spawning naturally, so that you have to grow pumpkins during the night, and therefore you'd have to come here during the night if you wanted to get your hands on some, which is an extra reason to be there. The other idea that they have is the heart becoming a sleeping heart during the day, another reason to force you to come to this biome at night, and to make the risk reward of this biome a little more obvious. What I also like is they have this idea for brand new plants of white roses and blood caps, and honestly, if they're going to call it the Pale Garden, I've resisted this entire video. It's been over a minute, and I haven't ranted about the fact that it's called a Pale Garden. It clearly needs to have more plants. You can't just have a bit of moss and a couple of trees and call that a day. So what if there was also a creaky chrysanthemum? I'm gonna be honest, that's a very long name, but this could finally fix one of the biggest pieces of feedback the community had about the sniffer. That was a much beloved mob. We even voted for it in one of the last mob votes, RIP, but also at the same time, it is a mob which was beset by problems with the drops that you got from it. People just didn't care about the pitcher pod and the torch flower, and the reason they didn't care about the torch flower is because, unlike the name, it doesn't glow. What if there was a glowing plant, and what if, to make it even more unique, it was 3 blocks tall at the same time? That is what the creaky chrysanthemum is basically there to suggest. Having a natural way to light up your gardens could be super cool, and even if it's a very low glow, many people would be excited to have it. Speaking of features people are excited for, one of the most common suggestions I've seen about the brand new pale wood is what if you could dye it, and I'm going to go ahead and say, despite the popularity of the suggestion, Mojang should not do it. Yes, Dinnerbone technically did say they wanted to have dyeable planks many years ago, and if they added dyeable planks, you could add 16 brand new sets of wood to the game, which would sound incredible on the surface, but I think the whole gimmick behind Minecraft's wood, as by the way, now we'll have 12 different varieties, the whole gimmick behind Minecraft's wood is that every wood is carefully considered and at least is believable in the real world. I would argue that Mojang has gone off on the deep end with mangrove and cherry, but to be fair, that's what the community wanted. The original mangrove design was kind of boring compared to its bright red one, and the same is probably true for cherry. If they tried something more realistic, it wouldn't be so fun. However, I think if you add 16 new wood types, you're going to not only overload the creative inventory, because you have to add 16 variants of every single wood variety. If you go everything from boats to fences, you've already added 160 blocks to an update and cluttered the creative inventory. You know, we need to organize our survival inventories, but we also need to make sure that you're not needlessly adding a bunch of blocks to it, and some people would argue 160 new wood blocks would be enough use by itself, but I would argue you could get much more use from saying, okay, do you remember when they made boats for all the different woods, or when they made the buttons for all the different woods? What if they did the same with ladders, or indeed with chests? I love the idea of brand new chests for each type of wood, and now that we have 12 types of woods, it just seems a little bit extra perfect. Maybe you can disagree, but I think this would be wonderful, and it'd also be a way to mark out and have slightly more unique chests, in my opinion. Speaking of chests, I don't think you're ready for this King B Dogs tweet that I actually referenced on my airport walk video on Wednesday, which I'm amazed that not only did that video manage to come together, but I'm also amazed that 150 people looked at that and said, yeah, I'll subscribe to the guy who's talking about Minecraft updates as he walks through an airport. Absolutely insane behavior for anyone to do. But you know what else is insane behavior? I ship them as a tweet from King B Dogs, and I only saw this first tweet at first where, oh, look at that. It's a version of the Warden, it's a version of the Creaking, and they're kind of hanging out together. Isn't this sort of weird? You know, it's interesting that that version of Twitter exists, but what I didn't realize is this was actually a quote tweet to a tweet with 3 million views saying, do you think they've explored each other's bodies? And that was 3 million views as of Wednesday. I can't imagine how many people are thinking about it right now, and apparently, if you're not familiar, apparently it's a gay community reference because one of them is a twink and one of them is a, you know, I don't think this is something you need to know about Minecraft mobs, but now we can say that this is a weird thing which some people think about, whereas I just like to be here and imagine things like, wouldn't it be fun if we had certain different recipes? Like, now that we actually have a proper way to see some of these mobs and items in the game, I look at things like the Creaking Heart, and I wish that Minecraft could work out a slightly better gameplay use for it. What gameplay use should they have? Well, I'm in a hotel right now, I've actually got to go. Let's talk about the rest from somewhere important. Okay, so the way I see it, there are 3 easy things that a Creaking should do, and the first of these is to fix a problem that its own creation causes because the Creaking Heart is not renewable right now. It only generates once when you load up your world, and that could easily be fixed because right now when you grow a brand new pale tree, it won't have a Creaking Heart inside of it, and a lot of people say that it should, but I don't actually like that as an idea because then you could, you grow a tree just for the wood and you'd accidentally have a mob that spawns. That would make it dangerous and also a little bit prone to accidental trolling or on purpose. I think it should be slightly harder. And so what if you could only grow a Creaking Heart if you had, inside of a tree, if you had a Creaking Heart below the tree when it grows? This would make it, when it grows, it would make it a bit more of a kind of like spooky block that would make the plant life around it grow differently. You could think of all sorts of different ideas of how it could corrupt the other plant life in the world. This is a fun idea by itself, but what if the block itself was also useful for other things? Imagine, say, a light source. Right now, the Creaking Heart is useful for making a mob, and that mob is of questionable use by itself. I haven't been able to truly test it. I look forward to maybe it coming out in the Bedrock betas next week, so I can do that. But with the Creaking not being that useful of a mob most of the time, giving people a reason to collect this block would be fun. And so what if you could use it for a light source? That could be kind of fun, right? You could maybe combine it with some glowstone, and then, oh yeah, you got some glowstone in there. You could add dye to it, maybe have dyeable, color sources. I think that having a brand new light source that could take advantage of this would be great. But you know what also would be great? Using the Creaking Heart as a way to, so this is an idea I saw on Reddit that I really enjoyed, but what if you could use the, because they said that you should have a magma block inside of a furnace, and that way the furnace could have a light inside of it indefinitely, even if it doesn't have fuel inside of it, or even if it's not burning. Right now, furnaces turn on when they're burning, then immediately turn off. What if you could put magma in there, is what someone said, but what if we used a more fun, topical block? What if you put the Creaking Heart in a furnace and it turns on the light forever? That could be kind of cool. You still have to use it for fuel, of course. You still have to put fuel in there, etc., etc. But what if the Creaking Heart would cause it to become a Creaking Furnace? Again, now that we have this idea of a block that can basically haunt you, you can use that idea of haunting for growing of plants, or for light, or indeed for lighting a furnace. And speaking of lighting a furnace, one of the things that has really lit a furnace in my mind is this idea of brand new structures in the Pale Garden. This is a little bit far-fetched, admittedly. We think this update is going to be out by December, so there's not time to generate the world's newest structure with all the biggest ideas, but I still think that maybe they could look into doing something, just something. So an idea I really like is this idea of the Pale Graveyard. I think it's kind of fun, but also I feel like you could take this into some other places if you wanted to. So instead of just having a Pale Garden Graveyard, or you could have a Pale Mansion. This would be smart because Minecraft already has the generation for a Woodland Mansion, and in the same way that there are 4 variants of the Bastion, depending on whereabout you find it, it makes the structure have so much more variance and makes the Nether feel more alive. What if there were multiple variants of the Woodland Mansion? You'd only have to give it a few unique rooms, and maybe even, you could argue you don't need to give it any unique rooms, because the fact that there are Creakings running around instead of, or as well as the pillagers, would make it such a fun structure. I can't stop thinking about the Pale Mansion Minecraft. Please, at least consider it. Even if it's just a regular Woodland Mansion, I think just a few Creaking Hearts around there would change things in such a major way. Speaking of changing things in such a major way, I want to give an idea that I don't think Mojang can use, but I do think that is worth talking about or considering, because the Pale Garden should have been a cave biome, right? I'm not just saying that like a lot of people do, where, when a theory comes out about something, you want to stick to the theory even once the reality has been true. But the reason I think the Pale Garden should have been a cave biome, similar in rarity perhaps to the Deep Dark, is because of the idea that it is a dark and scary and kind of messy biome that on the surface feels the tiniest bit out of place. I like that it's nighttime only, don't get me wrong, but what if you could use the Pale Garden as a underground biome, where that way it's always going to be scary, and that way there's a brand new type of wood that you specifically have to go underground for. This is one of the problems that people have with azalea trees, but also it's one of the problems people have with the underground in general. There's only 3 biomes down there. That's fewer than the Nether. It's fewer than people imagine for an end update, right? And it's given how many biomes we have in the overworld, wouldn't it be fun if some of those were underground and required some actual finding to get? Or maybe I'm going too crazy here. But what I'll also say is that we should have the ability to rename banner patterns to stencils, and then we could use them for more things than carving banners. Carving pumpkins is something that comes up a lot, but what if we had a similar system across multiple mechanics in Minecraft? Okay, speaking of multiple mechanics in Minecraft, I spoke to my editors, they had quite a few ideas about this, and one that I thought would be really interesting is the idea of using a creaking heart as a way to see exactly if, because the creaking heart right now basically is a daylight detector. What if you could use that in a fun redstone circuit to actually make a way to see when it's dark and when it's not underground? Because the right now the creaking doesn't care about whether it's daylight on it, it cares about whether, it is daylight in general. So we have a daylight detector that doesn't need daylight. I think that's a really fun idea, personally. I wanted to mention it right here. Speaking of cool ideas, I can't not say, I want to go back to the mausoleum and be like, oh, I forgot to mention there's coffins, and there's the idea of, a new structure would be great, but you could also, if you're creating brand new structures, you could actually just decide to give an extra purpose to one that already exists, because this is a fun, basic mock-up of an idea from Reddit. But what if the abandoned village spawned in the brand new pale forest? This would be very fun by itself, because it would lead to an explanation as to why they were there necessarily. You could also make a brand new variant of village that is only abandoned here. Maybe that would be frustrating, but I love the idea of, instead of just saying, yep, there is an abandoned village, it was attacked by zombies, what if it was attacked by something else too? Minecraft is going in this increasingly horror direction, right? And so that direction could take us to some interesting places if Mojang was willing. I've seen all sorts of fun ideas about how they could add more, because I keep calling it the Pale Forest. I don't think it's a Pale Garden right now, and I think the Pale Garden is actually a confusing name, given that we have the Pale Wolf, and he's not going to spawn there. Maybe Mojang should rename either that or the biome. But what I do think is a really fun thing to kind of top this off with is the best idea I saw in a comment from Wednesday's video, and it's this one right here, saying that maybe we should use these brand new hanging vines that right now are purely decorative, or again, almost essentially decorative. What if we could use those to make the Potion of Blindness? Blindness is an effect that exists in Minecraft, but you can't actually use it. A Potion of Blindness would be a really fun one to have, not just for silly times where you want to blind yourself, but as a splash potion, or as an arrow indeed. I think it would be so cool to have, and that's why I'm totally on board of doing so. Speaking of totally on board of doing so though, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been a bit of a weird one to record for the same reasons as Wednesdays. Again, Minecraft absolutely messing me up by deciding to come out with the biggest snapshot of the year while I'm out of the country, but it has been really fun to follow from afar, and I'm looking forward to Bedrock, which did have a beta. They skipped a version number, it went from 23 to 25, but it looks like they'll be releasing the brand new 1.22 or whatever betas next week, and I've got a lot of questions to ask about that, indeed, including what version are they actually going to call this update? Will they be 1.21.50 betas, or will they be 1.22 betas? If you have an opinion or a guess, let me know in the comments down below, and otherwise, I am very excited to play around with this stuff, and I hope that Mojang do seriously consider at least some of these features. I think that the Pale Gardens are a really fun drop by themselves, but I hope that given that we have close to 2 months, that they utilize that to make some improvements. Speaking of improvements, I am going to hopefully make some more improvements to my life by ending the video that has had to take place at a water park today, and I hope you enjoyed this replacement for Q&A Saturday, because I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully, goodbye. So the way I see it, there are 3 problems that the creaking has, and one of these is actually made by the very existence of the creaking heart itself. You see, when you bone meal the block, this is a random water park.